So you have a core idea that you want to share, and you're committed to building a talk around a through line. So how do you do that? What are the tools you need? Every talk is different, but what I want to share with you are 5 key tools that are ingredients in many talks. Some talks focus on almost entirely on one of these. Most talks, I think, incorporate elements from several, but we're going to take them in order. They are connection, narration, explanation, persuasion, and revelation. So let's start with connection. Why does this matter? Well, think about it. As humans, we're actually quite skeptical about allowing a stranger to come and poke around inside our minds. If your goal as a speaker is to do that, is to build a new idea in someone's mind, you pretty much first have to ask their permission. You have to deal with the natural things they have in the way, the skepticism, the mistrust, which are, by the way, really important tools. So how do you do that? The key is just to build a human connection with them. Now, that might be as simple as sharing an anecdote, just letting them know something about you, about perhaps why you got interested in this topic. It might be showing some vulnerability. Brené Brown has a whole talk about this, and in fact she starts it by showing her own vulnerability, where she allows her work to be described as boring, and she immediately has people liking her and laughing with her.
So I'll start with this. A couple of years ago, an event planner called me because I was going to do a speaking event, and she called and she said, "I'm really struggling with how to write about you on the little flyer." And I thought, well, what's the struggle? And she said, "Well, I saw you speak, and I'm going to call you a researcher, I think, but I'm afraid if I call you a researcher, no one will come because they'll think you're boring and irrelevant."
Any humor you can do, that's really great for building that connection, because humor, when people start laughing together, they literally are aligned. They start opening up. They want to go on this journey with you at that point. That connection is especially important when the topic you're talking about is challenging in some way. When Brian Stevenson came to TED, he wanted to address this issue of incarceration, the fact that kids were being sent to adult jails, injustice in the American legal system in general. So it's a challenging topic. He set about it by spending literally the first few minutes of his talk describing a personal story.
So I want to talk about the power of identity. And I didn't learn about this actually practicing law and doing the work that I do. I actually learned about this from my grandmother. I grew up in a house that was the traditional African-American home that was dominated by a matriarch, and that matriarch was my grandmother.
He spoke about his grandmother and how his grandmother had made him promise not to drink, and how his brother had then teased him about it, and how she had tricked out all of the siblings the same way, and he had everyone laughing, but he then said, nonetheless, 40 years later, I still haven't touched a drop of alcohol. And you felt, just hearing that story, you felt this deep admiration for this man, liking for this man. You just really wanted to go where he wanted to go next, because he just shared you an important and intimate part of his whole life. Then when he wanted to take us to look at these very challenging issues, we were there with him. We really wanted to go with him every step of the way. And this talk ended up with the longest standing ovation in TED's history. It was built on those first few minutes of establishing a really deep human connection. Don't shortchange that aspect of your talk. It can also be actually as simple as looking at people, just making eye contact, smiling. It's so important early on in the talk to find people in the first few rows who you can see, and just give a sentence of their talk directly to them. And other people can actually see that connection. It's not like, even if you're not looking at person X on this side of the audience, if you're looking at someone, that actually does something different to your eyes. People can see it. They can see you connecting, and the talk immediately feels different. So some combination of these early on in a talk is just great for making people willing to open up, to trust you. The absolute thing not to do is to come on all full of ego. That has the exact opposite effect of pushing people away. So just come on as a human being and start that authentic connection process. Connection matters.